YouTube to see what shows, by the way.
And I believe it's about a 5-second delay, and I think it's common. You think it's more like 20?
It's between 5 and 20, I think. There's settings that affect that.
And when you go live, I don't think we start off right away and welcome.
It's live.
Okay. Great. Welcome to this chat. I've got a couple of special guests here to join me to talk about the Battery Day and the shareholder meeting that we had that we all were watching last night. First, I'll introduce the two guests, what I know about them, and then I'll let them kind of introduce themselves. I know Warren for his great optimistic YouTube videos, and I also share some of his politics, which I don't think we'll get into tonight.
Can I just pause you, Paul? James,
yeah.
I'm looking on the YouTube. James's picture is like half covered by the word impressions. I don't know if you can move him.
Oh. Yeah.
That's better. It's not going to show up on YouTube yet, but that's better.
Well, the other thing I can do is I could just go like that.
That's going to be. I think that's going to be better for the viewers.
Right, when we don't want to show things.
And now your head is covered with live with StreamYard now. Your forehead is covered. Hey, Ragazaga. Your head is blocked by live with StreamYard now. The forehead. There's a thing up there.
And some of that is good.
That's better. That's better. That's a good look right there.
A great start.
Oh, that's a good look right there. Hey, we're learning.
Yeah.
Thanks, Ragasaga.
Hey, by the way, I should be looking at comments. Oh, we have comments here that I go. And then
I'm watching the comments.
Okay. And then James Stephenson, you were on another podcast, and I saw that you were.
Yeah, I was on another podcast where they introduced me by mispronouncing my last name. And, just like you just did, Paul. Sorry about that. I'll probably mispronounce your last name. Is it Fossey?
No, I'm Foss instead of Fossey. Okay. So yeah, that's all fair.
So we're even. We've both mispronounced the other one's last name. I'm James Stevenson. I had to say the same thing to Galileo Russell a couple of weeks ago when he interviewed me.
And you're a real kind of financial whiz, both in your day job and maybe when you're working on Tesla too, we hope. And do a lot of modeling.
Nerd.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. And then Warren, do you want to kind of say anything else about yourself before we get into this?
I'm an enthusiastic tech blogger. My YouTube channel is Warren Redlich. I'm also a lawyer, and locally I run a Facebook page, and I'm the local media for a community called West Boca Raton, Florida. So it was known as West Boca News, and I do a lot of things, none of them well. And full disclosure, I own some stock in Tesla.
Well, I think that's going to be true of all of us here, right?
Yes, I'm also a Tesla owner through a couple entities.
A disturbing amount of my net worth is now in Tesla because I started fairly small and it grew.
James, do you want to say anything else about yourself before we?
Oh, sure. Yeah. So for those who don't know me, I'm James Stevenson. You can follow me on Twitter at @ICannotUnderscoreEnough. That's where I'm putting all my content. I had a YouTube channel once upon a time, and I quit because it just took so much time to write and shoot and edit and put everything up on YouTube, and I was getting no traction at all. And I moved to Twitter instead and had a lot more success there, enjoyed it more. So yeah, that's me. I make financial forecasts for Tesla and publish those twice per quarter. I do a really detailed forecast, some say way too detailed. And that's because I just think it's the right way to forecast stuff. Yeah, my day job is that I do finance and spreadsheets for a living, and I wanted to kind of bring that experience to putting the best Tesla forecast together that I can. So I do that, and charts. I tweet charts. I tweet memes, that sort of thing for Tesla. Trying to fight the FUD. There's a lot of FUD on Twitter, so I try to counter as much of that as I can with the truth.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
I feel like I watch Gally Russell a lot. I watch Hyperchange a lot. And I feel like when you say you do a lot of charts and spreadsheets or whatever, I feel like it tends to force a little bit of a short-term analysis. Do you? And I don't do the short-term stuff. I'm always looking long-term. Do you feel like it creates any pressure for you to look at the short-term over the long-term, or you think you manage it okay?
Well, when you want to show the future, you have to show your own forecast, and I'm not afraid to do that, but it does open you up to the criticism of, well, that may never happen. And there isn't really a solid rebuttal for that, except to say, hey, I've been forecasting for a while, and if you look at some of the things that I was forecasting a year ago, they happened. And if you look at my earnings forecasts, the one that I got the closest was the Q2 2020 forecast. Tesla beat my earnings forecast by $0.007 billion. That's about as close as I'm ever going to get. I will never have a forecast that good again. It took a lot of luck to get there. There were a lot of offsetting errors above the earnings line that helped me out. But yeah, the short sellers have been as wrong as they can be directionally for many years, and it's easy to see. You just go to Twitter, you search for any of them and the word bankrupt, and you'll find lots of evidence that they were expecting it to have happened already by now, right? And none of us were. There's most thinking people realize there's a lot more room left for Tesla to grow, and a lot more happy customers in the future.
Yeah, I might be the bear on this panel, so we'll see
you?
how that rolls out. I mean, this isn't give the standard disclaimer. This isn't stock advice. This is just three people's opinions. I guess I did introduce myself. My day job is for 30 years has been as a database developer. My latest job title is like project lead data engineer. I work with SQL all day and architect financial data marts. I also run a couple of small family trusts. So I do, I've been managing those for about 35, 40 years. So I do have pretty extensive investment experience. I do write for a couple blogs. I write for Clean Technica and more recently for Torque News. I'm starting this YouTube channel, and I don't know where this is going, but this is the first episode. And I guess let's get into it. I thought I would start with what were your impressions of Battery Day, Warren? And I guess I'm looking for about 3-4 minute answer.
Well, my first impression is wow. But I would say it was like drinking from a fire hose. There was so much information. I think I actually have my notes here. I took several pages of notes on LegalPad. I think I would hit sort of the high notes, or what I thought were the biggest notes. Actually, let me hit one of my favorite things. Was something that there's certain things no one caught. So Elon was talking at the end of the annual meeting about China, and he said, now that we have a factory in China, we'll be able to do this, and we'll have factories in many countries in the region. And I feel like no one mentioned. It's like I was like, what did he just say? Did he just say? Because okay, all right, you got Japan, you got Korea, maybe you got Australia. That's not many. You got to add like Vietnam and Malaysia. You got to and then if he means that for Asia, how many factories are there going to be in Europe? How many more factories are there going to be in North America? So that was a really big moment for me. I think his projection of 20 million. Well, no, his projection. Oh, this is the other big thing that I took away from it was his projection that they would reach 3 terawatt hours of battery production by 2030, and then he slipped and said maybe sooner. I think that's a massive underpromise, because if they're not kidding about terafactories producing 1 terawatt hour a year each, and they're cheaper to build in smaller space than the Nevada Gigafactory, then why would they only build 3 by 2030? I think they're going to have 10 by 2030. I think they're going to be producing 10 terawatt hours of batteries by 2030. I think he massively underpromised. So those are, I mean, there's a lot to talk about, and I could start going through my notes, but those are two big things that really leaped out at me. It's about the machine that builds the machine more than it is about the machine, and those two things are about the machine that builds the machine. So
yeah, okay, great. Just to let you know, I have 10 topics, so you're going to have more chances to talk about everything. James, what?
Yeah, I agree.
What are your first impressions?
Yeah, pretty overwhelming. All the information coming at you from Elon, and so much good data. There was the pre-Battery Day festivities, the regular boring stuff that happens every year for the investor conference. Man, it really bothers me that we have to listen to the filibusters from the shareholder initiatives before we can get to the fun stuff. But they did a good job of staying on script to get through that pretty quickly. And then, Elon came out and set things up pretty nicely. I was happy to see charts because I like charts. And the one where Tesla has increased deliveries over the past 4 quarters and everybody else is down. I thought, missed an opportunity. I could have made that chart before now. But I did make one a while back, which was a bubble chart of year-to-date Q2. And Tesla is the only one up so far this year as well. It's not as impressive an increase as over the past 4 quarters because you get to count Q3 and Q4 from last year when Tesla was still really growing. Elon's remarks right before the intermission resonated with me enough that I took down those notes and tweeted that out earlier today in response to one of the comments I got back from Elon. He liked the recap that I did of the most important slide of the day, which was that 3 waterfall chart slide that they did right before the end.
Yep. It showed the 3 different cost savings, range, and I can't remember the third one, but
CapEx? Was it CapEx, the third one?
It was the range increase, yes, the watt hours per kilogram savings on the cost side, and then the capital cost savings, 69%. So it always makes me really happy when I see that come through from Elon that he read it. And then later on in the day, he replied yes to it, which was cool.
Well, I will, since I wrote a Battery Day expectations article a couple of days before the event where I was expecting, I believe, 64% reduction in battery costs. I was a little disappointed with 56. It was in the same range.
You didn't nail your number exactly.
I will say the timing, I was thinking more by 2025, where I think this is going to be accomplished more in the 2-year time frame. So it still may be beating my estimate. By the time you get to 2025, they may have exceeded the 56. I think this was just a 2 or 3 year plan. So the other things that I saw that I were disappointed is a 2-year delay in the $25,000 car. I had written an article earlier that Marcus Brownlee had an interview with him in April 2018 that a $25,000 car would be possible in 3 years if they worked really hard, which would be 2021.
If they wanted to. if they wanted to.
Okay.
Not just if they worked really hard, if they wanted to.
Okay.
You guys aren't saying that Elon is sometimes late, are you? Because Elon is
No,
sometimes
I wouldn't say
late, but
that.
he always delivers. Give him a chance to ramp. Come on, you got brand new
Yeah.
factory technology, never been tried before. That $25,000 car will be available once the batteries have reached enormous scale. Once they're making terawatt hours worth of cells per year, at that point, it'll become cost effective for them to make a $25,000 car.
Well, actually, it'll be a little bit of, as long as they can sell $35,000 Model 3s. I mean, if they can sell 4 million of those, they'll keep doing that too. So that it's a little bit that their products may have been more successful than they anticipated, and so they don't have to go down market as quickly. So it could be a little bit that. And then, of course, the Model S Plaid, Elon had tweeted 1 year ago that that would be available October, November 2019. So a 1 year delay on Plaid. I don't think the Plaid is that important, so I'm not making these as, horrible things. But if there's one thing I've noticed from watching the stock market for 30 to 40 years is it's all about expectations. And I think we can all agree expectations were sky high for Battery Day. I always give this example about Tesla. You guys are familiar with the 4-minute mile, right? That's something that they worked for a long time, and they finally did. And there are people who can do a 4-minute mile now. Elon is the kind of guy who goes out there and says, I'm going to do a 1-minute mile in 1 year. And then, of course, a year later, he doesn't do the 1-minute mile. But in 2 years, he runs a 2-minute mile. Okay, that's still better than any other person on the planet. He's just a little late. Everybody else is still running 3.5-minute miles. So, yes, he doesn't always meet his goals, but that doesn't take away from the incredible things he does.
I thought what you were going to say was the month after Roger Bannister broke the 4-minute mile, it was broken again by somebody else. And high school kids can run 4-minute miles these days. It's just the psychological barrier. It's a mental barrier of it's never been done before that stops people from trying or from trying hard enough to accomplish a goal. And once they've seen that it's possible and that someone is doing it, they want to do it. It's funny. I'll give you one more example, and then I'll be quiet and let you go on to your next topic. The best way to motivate people to spend less on electricity in their home was discovered to be telling people that their neighbors are more efficient than they are. That's actually
very interesting, because I recently wrote an article on clean tech showing how I had a 35-year plan, which I'm 10 years into, and I'm reducing my energy use from about $300 a month to about $65 a month.
Whoa.
And the article is called something like, My 35-Year Plan to Save $180,000. You'll have to check that out.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
Yep. Okay, next thing, shareholder meeting. And let me bring in, and we obviously can't talk about every slide, but okay, so you see we all get kind of small now. And the first thing I wanted to say about the shareholder meeting is, wasn't it really cool to see all these Teslas in the parking lot?
Only Elon can pull something like that off. 240 Model Ys, brand new off the lot. I sent out a tweet that this is what you do when you have a car factory and an event that requires physical distancing. Give everybody their own car.
I didn't realize that people got it. They got the cars done. I guess I should have known that it just wouldn't have been the random people showing up. Oh, okay. So they came in their own car and then moved to these.
So yeah, they had to park someplace nearby, and then all of these had already been parked and lined up and special software installed on them. Steve Jurvetson sent out a tweet about how they got to watch and hear the presentation from the screen inside the car through the audio system in the car with their volume wheel on the steering wheel, right? Just amazing. The creativity, once again, on display from Tesla.
Okay, you already mentioned that you loved this chart. I actually have a little something to say about it. Once again, a little bit negative. It'll be interesting to see how third quarter is. I don't know how much the traditional manufacturers, their sales are rebounding, but I have been listening to an occasional podcast by Autoline, and it talks very much to traditional dealers, and they are doing great because the supply of cars is reduced, and their big pickups, they're adding markup. They say they're getting more margin than they've ever gotten. People don't come in and look and all that because they're kind of afraid from COVID, so they just buy what's on the lot. They don't have to floor plan as much. So I know that's more of a dealer thing, but unfortunately, the dealers, which we don't like, are just doing fabulous right now.
So what you're saying is the traditional model, the dealerships are enjoying the opportunity to screw the consumers as much as possible.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so for some reason, Tesla's doing well. I don't know what that is.
No,
for some reason, the Tesla model.
In the short term, they will do fine, but eventually consumers will figure out they don't like being screwed. Yep.
Yeah, Q3 is going to be a record quarter for Tesla. It's going to be a record quarter for revenue and for deliveries. I'm forecasting 149,000 deliveries almost for Q3, which will be enormous. The prior record was 112,000. So it sure does a lot of good to have a factory in China cranking out Model 3s at a record pace and Model Ys getting cranked out of Fremont and delivered worldwide.
Yeah, if I could just follow up on that, that was another takeaway from the annual meeting part was because I'm actually working on my first. I'm going to make like 2 or 3 videos out of the Battery Day thing, and the value of having a factory on each continent and the amount that it saves Tesla. There's so many ways that it improves the business, the profit margin. He talked about it in terms of free cash flow, that it reduces the time from, just that. I think a lot of people have no concept of how big that is for Tesla's short-term and long-term profitability, business viability, et cetera. That was huge.
I've written at least 2 articles that detail the incentives difference, the transportation difference, the trade war difference, the cash flow difference. Yeah, I've written a couple articles on that about a year ago, as they were, I believe, both as they were going into China and then maybe again for that. But no, that's a great thing.
And just so people know what you mean, you're talking about your cash flows being better, your tariffs being lower because there's no imports, the cost or the price that the buyer pays is lower because they don't have to cover the cost of the tariff, and you don't have finished goods inventory on the water. There have been quarters where Tesla had $1 billion worth of finished goods inventory on the ocean on freight liners at once. Simultaneously, because of the way they load the wave to Europe, build for Europe early in the quarter, and then try to deliver everything before the quarter ends.
But then there's the intangible of you avoid the trade war. What if a politician says, "Hey, I don't want to give up all that money," and they do a tariff, and the tariff can be on either side. The tariff can either be for you importing parts in or you exporting cars back out. And either way, it impacts you.
It pays to produce locally under any circumstance. Yeah, if you can source locally and produce locally and sell locally, you don't ever have to worry about any tariff war.
James, where can people find that your numbers?
Oh, so for my forecast, the most recent one that I tweeted out, I think, was on August 7th for my Q3 2020 forecast. So yeah, search at @ICannot_enough on Twitter, and you'll find my forecast. It's very detailed.
And there's no Patreon to get firewall to get through it, or paywall or anything.
I never ask anybody for money. Maybe one day I'll start, but haven't done it yet.
The other thing I wanted to mention is I do think this chart isn't quite as good as it looks. They did leave off some things like Jeep and Subaru, and I realize Jeep is part of FCA, but I wonder if they left off a couple of niche manufacturers that actually had positive sales, just to make it look better.
Well, those are both tiny, though.
Well, let me pull it up on my other computer.
Well, Jeep is not tiny, but Jeep is part of FCA. Subaru, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure a couple of niche ones have probably been positive, just for random reasons.
If Jeep is part of FCA, then it's reasonable to assume it's included in the FCA number.
No, it is. In other words, I don't have an example, but I know that doesn't include all my auto manufacturers. So my first thing, being a skeptic, is did they leave off anything that distorts it? I mean, I am just naturally pretty skeptical, even of a company that I love, like Tesla. It's just my nature.
The only one there I don't have is Suzuki, because I don't know how much they sell in the U.S. This is probably a global thing. I make charts every quarter as the U.S. sales figures are published.
It probably isn't global just because it doesn't have Peugeot or PSA, or it doesn't have all those Chinese ones, BYD. So it's hard to know. Yeah. Anyway, we can move on. Let's go to goals, and we have. What did you guys think of the goals?
Well, I'm not sure. Are you talking about this slide?
Yeah.
Oh, this is like an attribution of where the goals go, where the batteries go, and I don't think that's quite that important. I think the important goal was to get to 10 terawatt hours of battery supply, whether it's produced by them or supplied by others. To go from 0.1 terawatt hours to 10 terawatt hours is a very ambitious goal. I think that's huge. I don't like, if you ask me personally, like if it was only about profit, if that's all it was about, then they should only make robo-taxis. They should only make the things on the far left, the small robo-taxis, and keep them and not sell them, because Tesla's they have repeatedly said it. Zach says it. Elon says it. The profit is in the robo-taxi model. Everything, like selling vehicle, you sell a vehicle and you make $5,000 in profit on the vehicle. That's a one-shot $5,000. You build a robo-taxi and you make $30,000 a year in profit on it for 10 years. That's $300,000. Why on earth would you sell a car? Why would you put the batteries into a semi when the same amount? I'm actually planning down the road to make a video talking about this, that the profit model would be every battery goes into a robo-taxi until you've reached market saturation with robo-taxis, because nothing else will generate the profit. And Tesla is not. Their mission isn't let's make as much profit as possible, even if I would like that as a shareholder. Their mission is to accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. And semis generate a lot of pollution. And I think the pickup truck's a big market. So if you're just, and I think like Cybertruck will be a good robo-taxi vehicle. I'm actually planning to put my dual motor Cybertruck out as a robo-taxi as like its primary use, because I don't drive that much and I don't go off-road or carry stuff in the back of something. I just want a Cybertruck because it's badass and it's an apocalypse vehicle. But yeah, I think so. As far as the goal of 10 terawatt hours, I think it's brilliant. As far as the breakdown where the terawatt hours are going to go or the gigawatt hours are going to go, I don't think that's terribly important. I think that gets shaped by the markets as you go.
Great. James?
Yeah, I think you answered your own question there, Warren. It is the mission of Tesla to advance the transition to sustainable energy and accelerate that, and that's the filter through which Elon runs his decisions. Is this accelerating the transition to sustainable energy or not? And in order to do that, they need to address all the polluting segments of motor vehicles. They need to address the generation of energy and the storage of energy, and they're doing all that, right? So it's just a question of breaking down the problem and then figuring out how you're going to solve it. Sure, you could maximize your revenue and your earnings by doing all robo-taxis. As soon as Carpathy can figure out how to get that software working and out to the field. It'll happen one day. We don't know when exactly. That's maybe one of the other things that...
That's a topic we should talk about.
Yeah, I guess we'll get to that one at some point. But yeah, they're thinking through the problem the right way.
You know, yeah, I could say as a software guy, although I don't know a lot about machine learning, but I do know an awful lot about software, and I'm definitely more skeptical than some. But just the short version is, I definitely think it'll get done somewhere between Elon's projections and the Bears projections, somewhere in between there.
A lot of space.
Yeah.
That's a pretty broad thing, obviously. I do like that they broke it down, just because, I don't know, it just gives us a baseline. Obviously, we could have done the research, but it's nice that they gave that. We certainly should mention that the non-transportation market is growing 16 times more, according to them, than the transportation market. And I've certainly felt for some time that Tesla would have done more in energy storage, but they just felt like, hey, they were doing good in automotive, and they didn't want to miss production goals on automotive just to provide a few more power walls, a few more power packs and mega packs. I mean, that doesn't look good either, but Wall Street would definitely notice more if they miss 10,000 cars than if they ship a few less mega packs.
Yeah, Tesla Energy is still growing, though. They were battery constrained for a long time, and they made the decision to prioritize the vehicles, but that's the right call. You should do that to get as many cars in new buyers' hands as possible, keep that word of mouth love spreading so that you sell more cars in the future, right? That's the whole marketing plan from Tesla.
Yeah, but it's possible the same marketing plan would happen with utilities. You get a few megapacks out there, and the utility executives talk to their friends, and they promote it. So I love to play devil's advocate, so I could argue the other might be, but it's kind of a counterfactual. It's what they've decided to do, and you know.
No, there's a business case for it. The business case for it is you need as many robo-taxi capable vehicles on the road for when robo-taxi goes live. And when the robo-taxi network goes live, you start generating insane profits. And then you can direct, and the other approach doesn't generate the insane profits that the robo-taxi network generates. So whether it's 2021 or 2023 or 2024, at some point, you start generating insane profits, and then you can start building terafactories rapidly. So you do what's going to generate insane profits first, and then when the insane profits come in, you do what you can do to accelerate the transition elsewhere.
And I'll tack on to that the other thing is there are close substitutes available for solar panels and for stationary storage. There are competitors who offer pretty much a like product. There isn't a like product for Tesla automobiles on the market. So that's the indispensable thing. You need to produce as much as you can to get out into happy buyers' hands.
Yeah, I agree with that. Anything you want to mention on this slide?
Well, I think this slide is a precursor to the next slide, right? That this is what would happen if they didn't go to terafactories. I think that was something that people misunderstood. I saw some people talking about this, like, oh, they're going to have to build 135 gigafactories. Like, no, I think you missed the point.
Right. Yeah.
I think this slide actually misled people, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. You're right. This is what they don't want to do, and that is true. But it does acknowledge something that I'm going to mention about the stock. I've had a rule that I've followed for close to 40 years, and I might break that rule with Tesla. But that is, once a company becomes the most valuable company in the world, its growth, stops or slows, or it doesn't do well. Once you get to the top, and it's based on a book called Stock Market Logic by Norman Fosback, but I mean, you can just look at it. Whenever a company gets to the top, at best they grow, the same as the S&P 500, but usually they start to, do poorer. Tesla, when they get to the 2 trillion market cap, or whatever the top of the heap is, when they get there, I think they might have enough stuff to go further, but obviously it's a ways before we'll see if that happens. But why I mention that is, organizationally, it's tough to, organizationally, it's just tough to manage all that stuff. James, you wanted to?
Yes, I was just going to say I'm skeptical that when Apple made it to the top, they stopped growing, or Google, or
Amazon.
Amazon is another good one. Yeah. There's a lot of room left for Tesla to grow. They've been the #1 automaker in the world by market cap since they passed Toyota months ago, and they're going to keep growing for a long time. Tesla's going to run past $1 trillion market cap and keep going for sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna be the bull here and say that I believe that Tesla's market cap in 2030 is going to be 20 trillion or more. And I know that sounds insane, but I think people just don't get the robo-taxi profit story. It's that stunning.
Yeah, I mean, I've said 10 trillion. I'm not, and to be sure, I didn't say Apple couldn't grow. I just said, they become, they start growing at a much slower rate. I mean, if you're growing at 10% a year, I don't consider that, hyper growth anymore. That's just kind of regular growth. James, you have as long as we all are doing our 2030 market cap, you got anything you want to say or not?
I do not forecast out that far because my model has 15,000 life formulas in it already, and that's forecasting only to the end of 2023. And I don't even publish 22 or 23, except for a couple of charts I've done that shows the vehicle deliveries growth over the years. It's just too hard to forecast earnings that far out. I do have to forecast market capitalization because I have to forecast Elon's compensation plan, and it relies on market cap as one of the conditions for his 12 tranches being deemed eligible for vesting. So I don't have Tesla market cap for 2030 guess at this point, but way more than $1 trillion you can sign me up for.
Okay. I will say when I saw this chart, because I had recently written an article that, and of course it doesn't have dollar figures, but that had talked about the, I believe, 86% reduction in the last 10 years, and I think it's either a 14 or 17% annual reduction. Yeah, I was surprised at the lack of it going down. It looks like it's only going down kind of from maybe 100 to 80 in 5 years. And that could be because certain markets, you kind of go from economies of scale to diseconomies of scale as you get close to material costs. And that's what I think is kind of happening in batteries, is they learn to make them better. But if they were still making them with nickel, cobalt, lithium, silicon, and the costs of that, were basically that as you approach that, and you don't make any radical changes, which is what the rest of the presentation is about, you start to hit what Elon would probably call a local maximum.
Yeah, you hear Ark and Best talk about Moore's Law quite a lot, and that's the problem that processors ran into for silicon chips for many, many years. They were improving at a steady state, and now you've got to get like an 8-core processor if you want the processing speed to be faster. That never used to be true.
Yeah,
same thing happened here.
I was following AMD very closely during when they were having the megahertz wars, and then basically what happened is Intel attempted to go faster and faster with their Pentium 4, and that they found they really couldn't do that without creating more heat, and AMD actually led that, the first dual core, and then of course now people run the same gigahertz that they ran 20 years ago. It's just they keep adding more cores every year. So they are using the silicon budgets to still give more performance, but then people like me as a software developer, we have to change the way we write code and make sure that it can run parallel, which for databases is a huge change. And we are still, even though that happened 20 years ago, we are very much still, I'm still rewriting stuff, not every day, but constantly to make it run better in a parallel environment.
So yeah, this slide was just another one that's transitioning you to the next one. It's just saying, hey, this rate of improvement has slowed so much because people aren't taking a fundamentally ground-up approach to first principles thinking on how to make every part of the battery manufacturing process better.
Yeah, that slide was where he showed the step change. The second slide that went along with the one with the curve you had with the batteries, there was another slide that showed the step change. The step change was, that's another thing that people don't get.
When you say the step change, he didn't show the one where
there was an orange line below that. There was an orange line below that in the second slide that went along with that showed the rapid increase in rapid decrease in cost. It just jumps the curve down another level. So that's huge, and that's the plan to have the cost per kilowatt hour, which is up there, which is coming up.
Okay.
That's where we get to the real meat of it.
Yeah, and this is obviously the meat of the meeting where they went into the 5 different areas. I don't know if we need to. Or do you mean this one?
No, you don't. No. You don't have it. If you're between those two, you don't have it.
Okay.
But the point is that they're going to dramatically reduce the cost per kilowatt hour of cells. They're going to, and there's other benefits. Can we just talk for a second about something that some things they didn't hit? They didn't hit what is the watt hours per kilogram they're attaining now. Elon has said they're going to get to 400 watt hours per kilogram in a few years, but they didn't say what is the energy density of the new cell now. I think it's 330 or 340, but they didn't say it. And I'm going to go through my numbers, not for the video I'm working on now, but for the next video, I'm going to go through and see if I can back that number out of whatever they said, because they gave some specifics on the cell and they gave some other specifics. So it may be that I can track out what they're saying the watt hours per kilogram is of the new cell, because that's a big deal. And then what's the cycle life of the new cell? That's another big thing. And then the third thing that came up early in the talk that I'm the only one who talks about this, was lithium iron phosphate is a monstrously important part of the plant. Because lithium iron phosphate cells cost, I think lithium iron phosphate will still cost less than the new cell when the new cell is going at full bore, because they are improving lithium iron phosphate as well in certain ways. And because lithium iron phosphate cells don't use nickel, it frees up nickel for the advanced cell and the other cells. So, and that means you do lithium iron phosphate. Shirley Mung said this, you do lithium iron phosphate in grid storage. And so they didn't talk about the cycle life of the new cell, which maybe they don't know yet. But we know that lithium iron phosphate, I think Shirley Mung in her interview with Limiting Factor, I think she said the cycle life of lithium iron phosphate is now up to 6,000. So you get and this one of the other things is what they didn't mention, the million-mile batteries. Like, well, they said it, you just didn't hear it. if you do a lithium iron phosphate pack with 300-mile range and it has 6,000 cycle life, you got 1.8 million miles.
Yeah, true.
They don't even bother talking about a 1,000,000-mile pack anymore because it's 2 million miles.
Yeah,
It's
or
like
if you've got a
we're talking
500-mile range Model S, you only need 2,000 cycles on that to make a million mile life, right? So
exactly.
Of course, nobody's ever going to make it to 1,000,000 miles on that plaid Model S because they will crash it long before they make it to 1,000,000 miles.
Well, I think it's
Too
a
much
common
fun.
perception, and in Autoline, people are on the chat. People are talking about the Autoline conversation earlier today. The guys at Autoline are saying, well, the car won't last 1,000,000 miles. And Elon has consistently said, no, our cars are engineered to last 1,000,000 miles. And then the other question is, well, would you ever drive a car 1,000,000 miles? And obviously, if you have a car and you drive it 20,000 miles a year, it's going to take you 50 years to drive 1,000,000 miles. You're not. But if you put your car out as a robo-taxi and it does 100,000 miles a year, then in 10 years, it's done 1,000,000 miles. And I do think that's the plan. That's why the 1,000,000-mile battery matters. And it changes the amortization of the cost of the vehicle per mile. If instead of expecting 100,000 miles of the vehicle, you expect 1,000,000 miles of the vehicle, then the cost of the vehicle depreciation per mile drops 90%. And you're reducing the cost per mile.
Yeah.
Now, I wrote an article on every car I've ever owned and why I sold it. And I've never sold a car really, except it had, it had they all hit a problem, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to fix that. I don't want to put the money into that. And if Tesla's, kind of go down that route that, okay, you start to have more and more nagging problems, then that's right. But if they can make them reliable where, okay, the only thing happens is, oh, maybe I rip the seats or something like that, or maybe after 500,000, you do an interior refresh for $3,000, but hey, the car's only half used up. So I think, I think there's going to be innovation, not just in Tesla, but in the whole industry out there. All those mechanics have got to do something. And one of the things they'll do is retrofit old Teslas that still have 500,000 miles left in them and make them, cool again.
And a lot of the problems that you sold those cars for might have been a cracked cylinder head or an exhaust manifold or a water pump or a million other things.
Yeah,
don't exist
I
in a
went through them, and
they can't break.
Most everything the Tesla doesn't have, they don't have those parts, so it can't go bad.
Yeah.
Of course, one of them was the Nissan Leaf, and it was the battery, was going, and one of them was an electric car too, but Nissan Leaf wasn't the longest-lasting electric car.
Famously.
So James, did either of you get an impression? Do you have a ballpark figure what you think the watt hours per kilogram is, or what the cycle life is of this new cell, or is it too early to say?
I think they didn't want to get into it because they didn't want the audience's eyes to glaze over when they started talking about chemical additives to the anode. I mean,
they didn't talk about electrolytes.
No, you start talking Jeff Don sodium difluorophosphate, you were going to lose every Wall Street analyst instantly, right? And I'm way out of my field talking about batteries.
But there's also the Osborne effect. Had they mentioned either the 1,000,000-mile battery or something with a very specific thing, there'd be a certain number of people who were going to buy a Model Y, in the fourth quarter and say, oh, boy, I want... I mean, they still could. If they want longer range Model Y, of course, they should wait, another year, because obviously everything is going to get better if you wait.
I got to respond to the Osborne effect because this really irks me.
Okay.
The Osborne effect matters if demand is roughly equal to supply. But demand, I am, listen, I'm a hardened believer in Tesla, even though I don't even own one. I'm a hardened believer in Tesla. Demand is unlimited. If it's effectively unlimited, we've got 1.4 billion internal combustion engine vehicles to replace. And in Elon's dreams, they're producing 20 million vehicles 10 years from now. Demand is effectively unlimited. There's two kinds of buyers, okay? There's the buyer who's like, I think I'm getting tired of my car. I already paid it off. Maybe I'll get a new car. That's one kind of buyer. The other kind of buyer is my lease is up and I need a new car, or my car, it now needs some huge repair and I don't want to repair it anymore and I need a new car. The second buyer doesn't care about the Osborne effect because he can't wait 2 years for the new vehicle. He needs a new car now. I don't own a Tesla because I was coming off lease and the Model 3 had just come out and you could only buy like the Performance, and I didn't have a reservation. I was gonna have to wait 6 months and my lease was up. So I bought a Volkswagen Passat, which I'm pretty happy with. That's a long conversation, but if I could have waited for the Model 3 to become, the standard range plus to be available a year later, then I would have waited, but I couldn't wait. And there is so much demand that the Osborne effect is irrelevant. I've heard so many people talk about the Osborne. It's irrelevant. The demand is nearly infinite. It's over.
Well, we know that at the Model. Sorry, we know that at the Model Y presentation, Elon has admitted that they were trying not to Osborne the Model 3 by talking up the Model Y too much and its advantages, right? So it's definitely a real thing. It's a hard earned lesson for Mr. Osborne the first time it happened. But yeah, you don't want to tell people, hey, it's going to be the greatest thing ever if you just wait 6 months to buy. Well, it's going to be a bad 6 months for your sales if that's your pitch.
But we all think that the Tesla next year will be better than the Tesla this year. And I'm going to say this, and you can tell me I'm wrong. James, you know Tesla, I think, better than I do. They sell every vehicle they make.
That's true. But every automaker does. They all sell every vehicle.
No.
It's a question of at what price do you have to
But they would not. Yeah, they wouldn't.
The airport.
They wouldn't have dropped the price, 3,000 a couple of times if they didn't want to goose demand a little. I know you can, that's a whole different conversation. But
if you want to say I'm never going to buy a product from a company that's going to release a better product the next year, you need to go live with the Amish, because you will never have a television, you will never have a cell phone, right? And you'll never have a car. They get better you'll sure never have a Tesla because they get better all the time. What I love the most about my Tesla, I bought a Model 3 back in December of 2018, is that it keeps getting better. It's a faster car now than when I first bought it, 0 to 60. It's got all kinds of features through the software, the entertainment center, the autopilot. Everything gets better with over-the-air updates that are free. And there's no other automaker on earth that's doing that. So what's the difference? You've got to buy it sometime, and it'll always be better the next year.
I just want to be clear. I'm not saying the Osborne effect isn't real. I'm saying it doesn't matter significantly for a Tesla because not only do they sell every vehicle they make, they don't sit on the lot for 6 months and have to have dealers give special discounts to sell them.
Yeah, there aren't a lot of used cars either.
Right.
I will admit it matters less to them than most. So let's talk about the bigger cells. That's obviously big news on the battery. Now this is before they talked about tablets. They said, oh, okay, if you were just going to make this, it looks like the bigger you make, the more cost reduction you get, but there's very much diminishing returns here. I actually didn't understand why vehicle range peaks and then actually goes down here with a bigger cell. Did you guys understand why this actually goes down?
I don't think that's range. I think that's cost. Oh, was that vehicle range? Okay.
Yeah, orange is vehicle range. This is cost reduction. I know.
Yeah, the only thing I can think of is that you would reach a point of diminishing returns as the diameter got too big, because you would start having more space between cells in the pack that's unused.
Okay.
Right.
I don't know.
So there's some optimal diameter, and
proportional, but I really don't know. But regardless, what this was the really big thing. Okay, if big cells are cheaper, why isn't everyone doing it? And it's because supercharging sucks. You make a big cell like this, and look, the supercharging, they didn't, give a scale here, so I don't know if it's twice or 3 times or 5 times, but it's a lot higher.
Well, before we go too far, let me just illustrate with an example what I meant. You've got a rectangle, which is your battery pack that you're supposed to fill. to take it to a ridiculous extreme, if your diameter was half the width of that rectangle, you'd only be able to fit 6 of them in there, right? So your pack would be half cells and half empty space between cells, right? So there must be some point of diminishing returns at which it makes sense to keep the diameter small.
Here's the reason I don't think that is the case. If you pi is 3.14. 3.14 is constant no matter what the diameter of a circle is, but we're getting into a geometry thing. So pi is all about the difference between the square and the circle. And you notice that it isn't like pi is small for, it's 2 for small circles and 6 for big circles. Pi is a constant at 3.14. But, I could be wrong. But that is my opinion. That doesn't change. And then I'd say this is the most impressive, one of the most impressive things I heard all night is the tabless design. Not that I totally understand it, but
the cigarette lighter.
It really makes a difference. It enabled the faster supercharging. It enabled the faster manufacturing.
Limiting Factor has a video. The Limiting Factor channel has a video where he explains tabless, and it's a pretty good. I don't think it explains all the detail of what Tesla has actually done here, but it was pretty good. And I think he actually hit this one key note that they said was it reduces the path the electrons have to travel from 250 millimeters to 50 millimeters, and that reduces heating, among other things.
Yep, that's what it is. The 5x, 250 to 50, if that is what it is.
So that's Jordan. You can follow him on Twitter at limiting the. Also, 2-Bit Da Vinci put out a video today explaining it as well. So yeah, it's just less travel for those electrons that really gets rid of the overheating problem for batteries. You saw in the previous chart that they dropped that heat limit way down. You can still charge it just as fast, even though it's a larger cell.
Right. They said that on charging. Now, I don't know if it's on discharging, but I don't typically hear about that. Maybe in track mode, you discharge very, very quickly, but usually you just don't discharge that fast that it's a big deal.
Yeah, tabless is the key to keep the heating low because the lithium ions have less distance to cover.
Now, did you guys understand the difference between the 5x energy and the 6x power?
No.
That's just
I did not.
Right?
I think maybe this is how much. See, what I thought it was that, and I think it's related to the 16% because 5x and 6x is 16%. So what it means, I think, is the peak wattage is 5 times as much. Well, it could be the opposite. Because energy sounds more like the amount of energy you have in it, and power sounds like how much can I get out of it at once for something like plaid mode because I want to run a really fast car. So maybe if this held 1 kilowatt hour and then the new one holds 5 kilowatt hours, something like that, but you can get more watts out of it so that you can run a big, and you're going to need more watts out of each cell, of course, because you have a lot less cells in your car. So it's not like, oh, wow, this is going to run 6 times the horsepower. It can't run 6 times the horsepower because you have many fewer of these in the car.
Well, just to do a simple number, if you start with a 21 millimeter diameter and you go to a 42 millimeter diameter, which is 46, you're doubling the diameter, you're quadrupling the area. So you would hope you would at least 4x the energy. I'm not sure. This actually seems off to me. It should be more than 5x the energy because you're more than 2x the diameter. So you should be more than 4x the energy, and you're increasing the height from 70 to 80. So I wonder if they're underselling that or there's something else going on.
Yeah,
may
there
actually
might be the sandbagging. I do believe that in this chart, they're not including any chemical advances
Right.
from
Right.
any of the other things. This is just size. But I agree with you. Yeah, if you just look at this, it probably should be a little more. Well, maybe they lose a little bit. I don't know if there's the spike in here. Each design has some disadvantages, so maybe there's a little disadvantage, or it could be sandbagging.
The big advantage here is the manufacturing, that you're making 1/5 as many cells, and then you're also the surface area or the surface volume of the thing that goes around the outside of the cell is less as a proportion of the materials. So you're saving money there, you're saving effort there, you're filling 1/5 as many cans with electrolyte. There's so many steps in the process where you're reducing the number of things you have to do.
Yeah,
so I think that's the really big advantage.
So I'll give the devil's advocate to both of those. One is, yes, you are reducing the surface area around that, but does a bigger cell need a 4 mil can instead of a 3 mil can? I don't know. Hopefully with the heating things, it doesn't need a thicker can. And then the other thing is, yes, you're doing less of it, but it also means when you're in QA or doing formation and you find one is bad, you're also throwing away 10 times as much material when you have to throw one away. So, everything has advantages and disadvantages.
Tesla throws nothing away. Everything is recycled.
But you know what I mean. You've thrown away your
work.
Effort. Yeah. Okay, so they ended that and said, okay, that all adds up to a 14% cost reduction. Let's talk factory. And
this was huge. Factory was huge. This might be the biggest.
And I love this one. Obviously, in the video, it looks better than my picture. I remember being in like 3rd grade, and my elementary school took me to the local Coca-Cola factory. And, I was mesmerized by seeing them, fill up the bottles. And I guess this is Coke too. So it is very mesmerizing to watch a factory. So yeah, they talked about electrode, which I believe the electrode is the combination of the anode, the cathode, and the separator, correct?
Over my head.
Over your head. Winding is obviously, you don't want a big long electrode, to make it compact. You got to wind it. You got to stuff it in the can. And formation, I really call that QA. That's testing to me. But
I think the key thing in manufacturing was in many different ways, they're reducing the amount of space necessary to do what they need to do. They're reducing the number of steps necessary to do the things they needed to do. Yeah. And they're reducing the number of machines necessary to do the things they want to do. And it's, the electrode wet process is one piece of it, but it was like every step of the way they found ways to eliminate, the best process is no process. The best part is no part. They found ways to eliminate parts and eliminate processes.
Yeah, it's so true. The wet process, they're talking about that slurry that you have to cook up to a certain temperature. You will eliminate all that process with the dry electrode, and you save all that time, you save all that machinery, you don't have to buy all the machines, and you make the batteries faster. All of that leads to more output from a smaller footprint, which is excellent for your ROIC, your return on invested capital.
I think anybody who wants to go deep in this should really just follow some of the videos, whether it's on Hyperchange or other people. All the rumors about Maxwell. I think all the Maxwell stuff kind of covered an awful lot of this.
Yeah, it sounds like Maxwell got them off to a good start. They might have had some copyrighted processes, but High-Bar Systems also helped with the battery manufacturing technology. So those were two really good acquisitions. I think Tesla just swoops in and takes over these little bitty companies that have proprietary technology.
And they did mention that on the call, that, it's not like they just took Maxwell and then are implementing that. They said, yeah, we've had to innovate there. They kind of had it. They had their projections and everything, but it's not like it just worked. They had some problems.
No, they don't just solve it for you for free. You have to make it work with their start.
So this is what you were saying, Redlich, the 10x footprint reduction, and that's all about not getting something wet and then drying it off. I mean, that's the key thing they said in Maxwell. It needs to be dry, and it's a pain. It'd be one thing if it was just water, but then it's this.
Yeah, I just like to point out here
that
I was reading some article. I think it was Elon actually complained about an article in Yahoo Finance, and I was reading the article, and I forgive me for saying this, but some asshat in Wall Street said that the presentation lacked granularity, and I was like, "What do you mean? They had powder?
Yeah,
powder is very granular. That's the definition of granularity.
And some rollers and some film. Yeah,
you got all the granularity you want." You're going to have granularity in the clay when you extract the lithium from it. There's going to be some powder there. There's all kinds of grains. What is he talking about? Cracked me up. I'm sorry.
And I don't know if they mentioned the 10x energy reduction, but obviously, it isn't all about cost. It's nice. And then of course the energy they do use, they're not going to use fossil fuels. They'll use wherever possible.
That's 10x cost savings, though. You'll take it. If
your
factory spends 10x less on electricity, hey, it's worth at least $180,000.
Yeah.
Right, Paul?
Oh, okay. You're talking about my article. That's on my home. Yep. Yeah, good. Good this. Okay.
Call back.
Yeah. Comedians are great at that.
This is another good one. This is another mind blown moment when they talk about Senate.
I believe Giga. Actually, I tied this back to Giga because Giga 1 is what I mean. I believe it has 13 or 14 lines and is running something like 35 or 40. So if you divide that out, that's about 3 gigawatts per line. So if you did 7 times 3, that would be 20.
Yeah. So, that sounds right.
Yep. So I think they're comparing this. So one thing is Tesla could always make this look good if they found, like a crappy battery manufacturer and says, yeah, we're 3 times better than this crappy one. But they are saying they're really 7 times better than theirs, which is probably already state of the art.
Yeah.
And this also allows the whole factory is 200. Isn't it 200 gigawatt?
The plan
no,
is. I think the plan is in the short run to get to 200 gigawatt hours. In the long run, they somehow turn these into. I don't know if they just add more lines or if they have some other way to get to terawatt.
Or they just speed it up 5 times. They just.
Well, no, think about this for a second. You're 7xing the line, but the line takes 1/10 of the footprint.
Oh, that's true. Yeah. So there's no
you're really
doubt.
70. You're 70xing the area.
I think you are right. Yeah, that is.
Every time you make one of these upgrades, you increase the output. So if you can make the footprint smaller, if you can increase the rate at which the cells are produced, if you can reduce the amount of time it takes to produce them, every single one of those is crucial to building a smaller footprint and getting more output from it. Yeah.
I think that's why they quit building Gigafactory 1 is they're like, wow, with this new thing, we're not going to need that much footprint.
Yeah, that plus the labor situation in Reno is crazy.
Is that right? I don't know about that. What's the labor situation in Reno?
They have low unemployment. So when Tesla moved in, everybody else moved in too, into that industrial area. This is way east of Reno proper, but that's the only large housing base from which to hire. And everybody has a job. You can't keep building more stuff that needs to hire people because there are no people left that need jobs to hire.
So if you do Austin, there's a lot more population to draw from.
Definitely, and a lot more people interested in moving to Austin. I think
Right.
Austin is the #1 city Californians move to.
Can we take
outside of the state.
Can we take a step from this to let me ask James what he thinks of this, and I'll ask you too, Paul.
Sure.
I think they're going to build a Giga or Terra factory somewhere on the East Coast, South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia. In my dreams, North Florida. Does that sound right to you, James? That would be probably the next factory would be on the East Coast and the Southeast.
I'm in favor of it. I don't know if that'll be the next one. Austin is going to be enormous. That's
Yeah,
going to be a bigger footprint to put equipment on than I think every other gigafactory combined.
Yeah,
it's giant. So that'll be good for North America for a while. I think there's more places to go. Southeast Asia. China's the #1 EV market in the world, #1 car market in the world. You probably got to build more there, if not at the same site, somewhere nearby. India needs electric
not
vehicles.
nearby. I think they could do interior of China.
I heard they were looking interior of China. I did hear that.
Yeah, no, they did. I just can't pronounce the.
Was it Chongqing? I thought it was Chongqing. Seriously. There's a city named Chongqing. It's a big city in the center, more in the middle of China.
Yeah,
I have a friend from there.
I went to China 2 years ago, but I didn't learn great pronunciation or anything. I went to Xi'an, Beijing, and Shanghai, which is pretty boring tourist places. I wanted to take like an industrial tour and all that, but the rest of the family just wanted to do the standard thing. So.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah.
Oh, you were asking what we thought, the next thing. I do like Warren's. It really makes sense to do a South Korea and a Japan just because they have auto industry and they're going to have a lot of unemployed people as Tesla steals their market share. And that's either going to cause a lot of protectionism or it could be more like Berlin where the government isn't so mad at you for taking their jobs if you produce a lot more jobs in the same country. So, and that's what we're seeing in Berlin. So if you add 2 in China, 1 in South Korea, 1 in Japan, and 1 in India, I really think that's enough for Asia. Especially, we hadn't talked about the news of Shanghai itself producing 1 million cars a year. So that's 5 million cars a year just out of Asia.
Yeah, that was another big moment.
The Japan factory won't be as big because they can't find enough land in Japan. It's not on top of a mountain.
Oh no, I think there's a lot of. I lived in Japan for a year, and Japan's economy took a really big hit. It's really been struggling. The cost of land, the cost of real estate has gone down dramatically in Japan. So it depends where you go. My hunch, by the way, about Japan, I've been thinking about this a lot because I love Japan and I've been to South Korea, and I think I love South Korean food at least. Is that Tesla has a strong relationship with Panasonic, and they have a strong relationship with LG, or they have a relationship with LG Chem. So I could see them working some kind of deal with Panasonic behind them to open something in Japan, and with LG Chem behind them to open something in South Korea. The key, and I want to mention India, by the way. I don't think anything's happening in India anytime soon. There simply isn't enough demand for vehicles, even the $25,000 smaller robo-taxi thing. The Indian car market, that's like 10,000 cars a year. It's too small. If they went to the minibus,
10,000, I believe it's 4 million a year. But
but at the level of a $25,000.
Okay, they're all little things, is what you're saying. They're all little.
They're three-wheelers. They're mopeds. That their demand for vehicles comparable to a $25,000 Tesla is trivial. It's just too small. But if you did some kind of mass transit thing like a Tesla minibus, which I was disappointed they didn't hint at that at this event, but that's how you spread the acceleration of sustainable energy to poorer countries like India and to North Africa and to maybe to Latin America. I think Latin America is another possibility. Brazil, Argentina, somewhere is there potential for a gigafactory, terafactory there. I'm not sure about that.
The Indian protectionist tariff is out of control. I think it's over 100%. So the only
Yeah.
way you're going to sell vehicles there is to build in country. You've got to build a gigafactory within India to make that work. And once you do, there is a thriving luxury car market in India because there's such a wealth gap in that nation. Plenty of people do pay the exorbitant import tax to get luxury cars. In that, and the really small cars that sell the best in India, there's a huge gap waiting to be taken by somebody, and nobody takes it today because the government makes it so difficult to have your own factory. But Elon has worked magic before in that regard in China, so we'll see.
I could see them doing solar in India first. If they did solar in India first and used that as a wedge to then you could produce batteries and solar in India, that would be a start. But yeah, the bureaucracy, all the hassles in India, I don't know if it. I think they just sort of said, we'll get to it when we can, but that can't be a priority.
Now, when Giga Austin was proposed, I actually wrote an article proposing they build it across the border, and it was based on, not that the Mexican market is so great, but it does have unique trade advantages. Mexico can export to the U.S. fine. They can, of course, they also have a free trade agreement with Brazil, which is a decent sized market. My wife is from Brazil, so I've been there many times, and they have a decent sized market.
Yeah.
All right, let's keep moving.
I'm not do it yet, but I think it would come. So that's the advantage, where if you go to Brazil, you can't really use that for the U.S., but Mexico could both, send some models to the U.S., send some to Mexico, send some to South America, and, could be a really good, way to go when they get around to it. Okay, let's get.
Let's keep moving.
Let's keep moving. We've seen this before. This just shows it's a little bit smaller, and we've kind of talked about that.
Smaller footprint with way more production. It's great.
Yeah. So they just made clear that they're not going to. And maybe you think this is sandbagging it, but they're not going to supply everything we need. They're going to produce a lot more, but other people have to come to the table too.
And they'll still be buying a lot in 2022 from Panasonic, LG, and CATL, right? That's 100 gigawatts just of what Tesla's going to make.
Yeah, I think Tesla's demand for batteries is effectively unlimited. It's just. They cannot produce enough batteries for what they've been constrained on grid storage because they just can't get enough batteries. Yeah.
So now we're switching over to anode materials, and what I loved about this is the different mindset. And it reminded me of, in the 80s, I was working at IBM in manufacturing. And I don't know if you've heard of something called the economic order quantity. But basically, given ordering costs, you can, in any business school, figure out that, if the order costs are $50 and the inventory costs are this much, the economic order quantity for, pencils for your business are to order 500 pencils. And it's just a simple formula because you're balancing. You order too many, and you have high inventory costs. You order too few, and you're reordering them every day. You have too high order costs. So it's just a simple formula to do that. And that's the way Detroit worked for many years. Yep, just put it into the formula, and that tells you how many to order. And Japan had this whole different idea of Kanban and just-in-time inventory, and they just worked the formula backwards. They said, don't consider it a formula where you just put those things in. Take a look at the setup costs, and if it takes you a day to switch from white paint to red paint, figure out how you can do that in 5 minutes. And it totally changes how you do it. So don't consider things a constant. And that's exactly what Tesla did here. Everybody else was like, this silicon, sure, we want to put more silicon in the battery to make it more dense. But when we do that, it makes it fragile, and I believe it hurts your life. So yeah, let's do this really exotic. And this showed the first three exotic ways to process the silicon to not have the problems. And they looked at it from the other way. Well, let's just take a very raw silicon and change the way, and they do a little processing with it. I won't say they don't do any processing. They do stabilize the surface through this polymer coating, but to me that looks like minor. They found a way to keep the material pretty natural and just kind of allow it to do what it does without totally changing it, which is where everybody else was going.
Yeah,
this blew me away.
Principles. Yeah.
This one blew me away, because if you go back up to the slide above this, I actually was on Twitter and encountered Shirley Mung, who's a prominent battery researcher, and she figured it was just 10% silicon and graphite. But you can see on the slide above this that that structured silicon structured in graphite was choice number 2, and they went with choice number 4. And even Shirley Mung didn't catch this when she was watching this, and she's one of the smartest people with batteries in the world. She thought it was silicon structured in graphite with like 10 or 20% silicon. And it's really the thing on the far right, which is, much less per kilowatt hour, and it's all silicon. And it was like, if you blindside Shirley Mung with battery technology, you've done something big. And it's like, because limiting factor had this big thing on silicon, and all right, he is talking to Shirley Mung. Well, maybe they do 10 or 20%, and after that, you don't gain that much. And no, they went all in. Like, okay, this is.
And at the same time, they lowered the cost to $1.20 per kilowatt hour. That's unbelievable. Yeah. Why pay for the expensive stuff if you can figure out how to make the raw material work more directly?
Yeah. Now, I don't see explicitly. I don't see the 100% anywhere here. But did you hear it in comments, or where do you see that they went to 100% silicon? Because I heard you say that last night on your live stream, Warren.
It's raw silicon stabilized through elastic ion conducting powder coating. It's right there on that slide.
Okay, but I guess okay. So the coating, so it's not 100%. You're thinking, it's 95% because the coating, is thin, and then I guess you're kind of assuming nothing else. That is probably right, but they also could just be, from your day job. Not everybody always gives the truth and the whole truth. They may ask you to say that on the stand, but sometimes you give the truth, but not the whole truth.
Yeah, it's possible they're mixing graphite or something else in there. I don't know, but the way they described it, it sounded like it was just silicon.
Yep, I hope you're right.
I thought the problem with using 100% silicon was that it would heat up too much, but maybe the tabless electrode design
it expands too much.
Right? Yeah,
it expands too much,
and
then cracks. Yeah.
And destroys your cell. So if you can figure out with a tabless design how to minimize the heat, maybe you minimize the expansion, and then you don't have the failure.
But I don't think expansion was from heat.
But also, just look at how kind of random it is. It doesn't look like it has to be. It's not perfectly honeycombed in there. That's partially so that they don't have to process it to make it a specific thing. But it also just may be that, it's comfortable. There, it doesn't look real dense. There's like a little room. If it does expand a little, it's it's okay.
I think that's something we're going to hear more about later. They left that. It sounded like 100% silicon, but maybe it's something else.
And they didn't say single crystal cathode, which I was expecting to hear from Jeff Don's talk, and didn't hear that at all.
Yeah.
Now this slide is interesting because you can see, and I assume this is watts per kilogram down here. It's a little hard to see because Elon's in front of it. You can see cobalt and nickel are similar, just around this 1200, 1100. The big difference is cobalt is about twice, as expensive. There's the human rights issues. It's also kind of more scaling issues. But cobalt has always been needed, I thought, for safety, because it kept the thermals kind of under control. So that's why I always thought you needed it. But maybe all these other innovations mean they can keep the thermals under control without the cobalt. So they're getting rid of the cobalt. So now let's talk the difference between iron and nickel. And you can see the cost. If I call that 6 and I call that 17 or 18, let's call it 18 to make it simple. Nickel is 3 times the cost, but if it gives you twice the energy per pound, you need 2 pounds or 2 kilograms of iron to equal the energy of 1 of nickel. So it really would be kind of like 1200 to 1800.
At the cell level, the iron phosphate batteries are significantly heavier than the nickel batteries. But when you go to the pack or vehicle level, or if you sell the chassis instead of sell the pack, the difference is a little bit less. But the cost difference is pretty substantial. The cost gain. The only challenge is now you're adding mass to the vehicle, so you have to use a little bit more energy to move the vehicle. So you lose a little bit on that end. And maybe you make the handling a little worse. So you're putting more stress on the chassis because you have more weight. But I think the cost, if the Model 3 pack today is $6,000, the Model 3 pack with lithium iron phosphate today is $3,000. It's a huge drop in cost for the vehicle. And yes, the nickel approach that they're going to do is going to drop the cost per kilowatt hour of the nickel chemistries, but they're also doing some of those improvements to the iron phosphate, like cell to chassis. Mm-hmm. So that will also reduce costs there, and the manufacturing processes, and I don't know if you could do lithium iron phosphate with the Maxwell process. I assume you can, but I don't know. I don't know what the process is for making lithium iron phosphate batteries. That's one of the. Sorry, go ahead.
It did a really good job of explaining the rationale behind why would you pay more to put nickel into a battery. It's because you need when mass is critical to the application of the battery, you use the high nickel content, and when it's not, you use the iron content. So for your stationary storage, you may as well use the iron because it doesn't matter how much stationary storage weighs. But for a semi, for a roadster, you're going to be charging so much more for those products, and you care how quickly they can accelerate and how well they can perform on a grade. You need the high nickel content.
Right, with the semi in particular, you need less mass in the battery because every pound of mass in the battery is a pound you can't carry in cargo because you have an 80,000 pound limit.
You got to limit your tear weight.
That is true, but realize that not all semis are weight limited. If they're shipping pillows, they're volume limited. So
every pound of cells is a pound less cargo you can carry.
Yeah.
Well, what I was saying is, if you're weight limited, if you're taking pillows in the semi, it's volume limited because they're only allowed to be 80 feet long and so high and so wide. So some semis are weight limited, some semis are volume limited.
Okay. I mean, I've represented people who are ticketed for driving overweight, and it's a very common violation, and it's a very expensive ticket.
Okay, so you're saying it's a pretty it's pretty common.
Oh, I love this slide. I love this is my favorite slide of the whole talk.
Yeah, I mean, I love the diversity. I was actually thinking of writing an article on this a couple weeks ago. Obviously just speculation based on many other people. One of the things I wanted to say, there's all these estimates of cost. I brought up a nickel. We can't know the price of nickel. If the price of nickel could triple in 5 years, or it could go down based on the innovations that happen in the nickel industry. So what's great about having diversification is that they can take this line between iron and nickel and manganese and high nickel, and they can move it a little bit to the left and move it to the right if nickel has a 2-year spike or it has a 2-year, let's say nickel, for whatever, we find a big find and it goes way down, they can make almost all of them. The other thing is they did say long cycle life. It doesn't say these don't have long cycle life, but it was interesting that was mentioned as a specific advantage instead of low cost, which is, of course, important to utilities.
You got to show a pro for each one of them, right? So you don't want the only pro to be that it's low cost.
Yeah, I expected low cost to be the main one, but they actually did long cycle life. But maybe they thought they mentioned cost. I don't know.
I was struck by that Powerwall is not in the iron-based category. I think that's a mistake. I don't know why you would bother making Powerwall with nickel if you're trying to save nickel for the things that need it. I don't know any reason why Powerwall needs to be nickel and can't be iron-based. So I was struck by that. I think the point about long cycle life matters if you're doing robo-taxi. The vehicle you own, if it's got a 500,000 mile life, you don't really care if it's got a 1,000,000 mile life. The vehicle that you're driving 20,000 miles a year or 10,000 miles a year doesn't matter. But for a robo-taxi that's doing 100,000 miles a year, it matters. So, I think that's why long cycle life matters there. But I don't know, because you're not planning I don't know. I didn't really buy that. I think you're going to see iron-based. I think that you're going to see iron-based in every level of vehicle at the low end. You'll be able to get a low-end Model S with LFP battery pack, and it'll only get 300 miles of range, but it'll only cost $60,000. Imagine a Model S for what a $60,000 Model S does to the BMW 5 Series, Mercedes E-Class, and Lexus. It's just that would just blow up the mid-level luxury car market, a $60,000 Model S, and I think that's doable.
It's getting close already. Yeah,
Model 75 now.
Yeah, isn't starting a lot higher than 60 now.
I think it's 75, right? That's last I looked.
Yeah. I believe so. Yeah.
For it. Yeah.
Now the big thing, the different. I've obviously written articles based on Warren's predictions. Is you had the Cybertruck, like you say, in all three. Yes. I was really surprised to see the Cybertruck because I really think a Cybertruck has a lot of room underneath it. So I don't know why it's so mass sensitive.
Because of payload. Because I think the theory is because it has a gross vehicle weight rating, and if you're doing it with a 3,500 pound, what was the number? I forget what the number is. It's supposed to have a payload of 3,500 pounds. So you can't.
Yeah, okay, you're right. And then obviously the plaid one just needs the best. I mean that just makes perfect sense.
Performance.
But which. You kind of mentioned it, but not everybody. Sure, some people need payload, but a lot of people are going to buy that Cybertruck because it's badass, like you said. And you're not going to care if you lose 500 pounds of payload because.
Right. No, and I think the alternative there that no one talks about is suppose you're getting ready to buy your Cybertruck and Tesla says, "Hey, you know what? If you buy the LFP version, we're gonna knock off $3,000 from the price." And you're going to get the same range. You're going to get the same range because there's so much volume in the Cybertruck.
Yeah. I mean, there's plenty of room. If I don't need 500-mile range, if I'm just buying the 300-mile range one, I'll save 3,000. Yeah. What do I care if it's an extra 200 pounds? I'm not doing anything with my Cybertruck either.
And especially like what you said, if the price of nickel goes up, it would make sense for Tesla to offer more iron phosphate varieties. I think the only challenge there, I don't know the answer to this question, is what is the current supply of iron phosphate batteries and how hard is it going to be to scale that up? Because I know CATL makes them, but how many do they make? And can they scale that up easily?
Oh, whether they can scale it up, I don't know. But I have looked into specifically the amount of iron mined in the world.
Oh, it's huge.
It is huge, and phosphate is incredibly. That's fertilizer. That's incredibly. So the markets, now I'm not saying we're ready to build huge amounts. Yes, that takes time to change the factories. So, there's lead times, but at least you can do that over a 2-year period. Tesla can convert, for their battery lines from nickel to iron, over a number of years. But if there's a shortage of nickel, there's, quote, nothing you can do about it.
Yeah.
The other consideration for Cybertruck and for Semi is braking. With an electric motor, you don't have to worry about your acceleration. You're going to be fine. You get all that instantaneous torque as soon as you put the hammer down. But the braking is the problem when you're towing a lot of weight behind you.
Yeah.
You want to reduce the mass of your vehicle so that you're able to stop the load you're carrying behind you.
Yeah. Oh, okay. With the trailer. Yeah, you're right. Now, when we get to this one, I did think, this was great. They're saying of the cost, nickel's kind of expensive. Cobalt is a nice little amount, but it's really only 5%. I'll have to check that versus my prediction and see if I had that nailed. Lithium, they'll talk later about how they're saving money on lithium. And then processing, labor and capital is a big amount of the cost for this. And that's great that they're showing that. But then when they save on processing, I do believe they have to be careful not to double count, because, the super duper factory was what the previous thing was about. Right?
You can save on both, and they're multiplicative. You get an arithmetic gain if you can figure out how to do two things better than you did before, right? They multiply by each other.
Okay, yeah, I see. If you save 50% on two things, you multiply 0.5 by 0.5, and it's 0.25, something like that.
Yeah. So if your daughter runs a lemonade stand in the front yard today and she sells 100 glasses of lemonade for $1, and then tomorrow she goes out and raises the price to $2 and sells 200 glasses of lemonade, she didn't make $200. She made $400, right?
So Paul, I think what you're saying is that this slide is just repeating the Maxwell savings, but I think this is actually a different approach. This is a separate thing from Maxwell.
I disagree. Well,
you might be right. I'm just not sure.
Oh, actually, that is what I thought, that it was duplicate, but it could be at a totally different level. Yeah. This could be all the stuff that is done, because let me describe the battery process as it's been explained to me, and maybe Limiting Factor has done this, but maybe they didn't focus on the economic and transportation. What I have heard is we mine these materials in like Australia, and then we send them to China to do this processing to make them of, the lithium, the right quality, and the nickel, the right quality. And then maybe we send them to Japan to go into a cell, and then we send them to the Gigafactory in Nevada to put them in a module in a pack, and then we send them to Fremont to put them in a car. And, so there's just a whole lot of transportation, and obviously they're looking at trying to do, everything on the same continent, so you're not having to ship stuff all around. So maybe this is all the stuff you do on a cathode, before you do the Maxwell stuff.
Yeah.
And even though it looks similar in that they're getting rid of a lot of the water and acid, maybe they're just doing that at both this level and at the cell level.
That's what I think.
Yeah, just to make the cathode. How do you get raw materials into the right shape and into the right condition to become a battery?
Well, I don't know if they're making the cathode or they're making the ingredients for the cathode. I think maybe they do make the cathode. So in other words, on a nickel magnesium cathode, do they do that right before they put it on the cell? Or, that's I think
over my head.
Yeah, I think we're getting a little beyond our, but yeah, I think this is the step. They do all this even before So this traditional process, is probably done on a different continent than the cathode is actually put in a cell today.
Yeah, it's done in China.
Because I believe each country has a different comparative advantage in different things.
Oh, I love comparative advantage.
Yeah, I taught economics for a year in a former life.
That's it. We're going to do a video talking about universal basic income and comparative advantage. That's our next video.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, UBI.
Why comparative advantage eliminates the need for universal basic income? We'll have that conversation.
Okay. Great. I'll have to study up on that one.
So I love the callback to a bunch of stuff happens and then paying it off with less stuff happens. That's classic Elon Musk humor. That came straight from him.
Yeah, I mean, that's partially being intentionally vague, but it's just that there's a whole lot of stuff. Look at all the color in this one, and less stuff here. Only a little bit of water and supposedly no wastewater. What little water you use, you just reuse. So that's great. Zero wastewater. That's great because nobody. That can't be easy to get rid of. And less process cost, less investment. I will say, and I'll have to look at James's model sometime. Every time I have modeled capital cost, I've been disappointed as to how small a part of the car it is. I think I found it to be something like 3,000 on a Model 3 or something, and I was like, oh, okay. So even if they got rid of all the capital cost, and I just did that by, dividing the depreciation, by the number of cars or whatever.
That's how you're supposed to do it.
Compared to all the other costs. I was expecting it to be like 10,000 per car, and it was like 3,000 per car.
Well, how long do you want your factory equipment to last? Do you want to have to buy more every million cars? You do not, right? You want your factory equipment to last you a lot longer than that. So the robots that Tesla's buying are good for, 5 or 10 million. And then you depreciate them over that long life.
They'll still depreciate them over like 5 years, and then they'll have the greatest thing ever, fully depreciated equipment, and then it's a cash cow.
They'll depreciate them on a per unit produced basis in a factory. That's the standard gap treatment. I think you want to make sure that as you're producing vehicles, you match the cost to the revenue. Yeah,
okay, maybe it's for tax that you go. Yeah, for tax you go as quick as you can possibly do it. But for gap,
if it were land, that would be different. But if it's going to be cost of sales, and that's where the depreciation would be recorded, then it's likelier, more commonly, going to be depreciated on a per unit produced basis. So in quarters when you're making more cars, you're taking more depreciation.
No, I agree, but don't you agree that they could have something that they think is going to last, a million cells, and then if they do good planning, they could get 2 million cells, and so then the second million cells you make with this robot,
definitely,
it's fully depreciated, and you don't have to take any.
You've got a zero net book value asset that's still producing for you. That's a great situation to have.
I mean, that I've seen like vulture investors. That's what they look for, is some company that basically has assets at a very low book value, but they look at them and they're like, yeah, those assets still, do useful things. They just have been fully depreciated, and if they're still valuable, and then they make a takeover offer on it or whatever. So this is kind of what we were talking about. Transportation, and what is this? South Carolina. I don't know where this is in the Gulf of Mexico. I thought
Carolina is Piedmont.
What?
I think North Carolina is Piedmont Lithium Reserve. So that's what's going on there.
And then Canada has a ton of mining. And then this is clay in Nevada. I don't know where do you think this is?
You might go back to Omaha. They lost out on the Austin Gigafactory, so maybe they'll be willing to put together a cathode factory.
Did you hear Sean Mitchell was tweeting about something going on in Colorado? But I don't see Colorado on here. But he's
there's a lot of theories there. There's a lot of theories out there. Somebody else has a theory about Ontario, and you can see Ontario's on the map.
Yeah, but Ontario, all the mining in Canada is in Western. I believe is in Western Canada.
Isn't High-Bar in Ontario?
When we say Ontario, do we mean Toronto? Is that Toronto?
I think it's just outside Toronto, like Richmond. I forget the name of the town. I believe that Tesla has employed. If you go on the Tesla jobs website, they are hiring in some town in Ontario, which I believe is where High-Bar is located. So if it could make sense to build a gigafactory or terafactory in Ontario and access, and there could be nickel reserves in Ontario. I don't know. It's a big place.
I did.
Check. Yeah, we're over an hour 45 now. I'm going to have to check out in the next 15 minutes. So.
Okay, we'll try to.
But feel free to keep going. Yeah.
I'll move a little bit faster, but we, like you say, how long did you go yesterday, Warren? On yours?
I went over 2 hours yesterday, and I was exhausted.
So this is about a 5X, and I'm surprised they didn't put 5X. They love to do that. I did look into. I did actually invest in a nickel.
Well, let's skip this to go to the next thing because we're running short on time.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lithium, really straightforward. They're going to get lithium. This was mind-blowing to me. They're going to get all their lithium basically for North America from 10,000 acres they got rights to in Nevada. This was like, this is a small thing in scale. They're reducing lithium costs by 33%. But, spectacular jump. We solved this problem. Let's move on to the next one, right? Silicon's easy. Now lithium's easy. Now nickel's the only big problem.
Yeah.
The other thing is you'll see a lot of, scammy ads always. Oh, batteries are going to explode. Invest in, this fly-by-night, lithium investment in Chile or something. So I also liked that it kind of puts that to bed.
Yeah.
Yep, a simple process with salt. I will say, I believe Clean Technica is going to do an interview tomorrow, or maybe it was today, of somebody who disagrees with this, doesn't think Elon's or Drew's way of getting lithium out of clay will work. I guess I go to the Peter Thiel. Don't bet against Elon.
Never tell anyone you can't do something.
You're just admitting you don't know how to do it, but and he may not know how to do it, but he's more determined than you. So
yeah, well, you could never land an orbital rocket booster. Honestly,
hold my beer.
December 21, 2015 blew everything. Anytime you say Elon can't do something, it's like December 21, 2015. I'm done. I watched the third Falcon Heavy launch in person from Jetty Park, and I watched those two boosters come down, and that's religion. If you have any religion at all, that's it.
Well, yeah, when I mainly use that for FSD for people who say they'll never do FSD. I tend to think I think I tweeted or commented if you know how stupid the average driver is.
Yes.
The average driver could not land a rocket booster, but they can somehow drive a car.
Paul and I are both in Florida, so we understand Florida man drives on our roads.
I'm in Florida as well, and the only thing scarier than the ability of the average driver is that half of them are worse than that.
Oh, but not in Lake Wabagon in Minnesota. Everyone is above average. So.
They're all above average.
Yeah, that's what a radio host said. I spent a few years, I guess about 9 years in Minnesota. Recycling, they talked a little bit about that. This reminds me of like aluminum recycling. You don't have to encourage companies to do aluminum recycling. It's very economic. what you have to do is like mandate plastics recycling, because nobody really wants to recycle plastics from the industrial side. They're just showing that, yeah, it's valuable. They're going to do it. They just have to wait for some batteries to wear out. You can't do recycling until you have a decent supply.
It's important, but it's not important now.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's way less cost than having to go mine and explore for it. Just recycle the ones you got already. Fully recyclable, fully renewable energy, the mission of Tesla.
Now, I know I've been a bit of a pessimist, but I was kind of blown away by this casting. What I didn't realize until now, well, especially when they added the battery pack, is the car is just going to be 3 pieces. It's going to be the front, the back, and the battery. I mean, I realize you have windows and doors, but it's like a 3-piece car, you know?
It's a little more than that, but yeah.
Yeah, if you want Sandy Monroe's shows, this was a recommendation he made to the auto industry in Detroit for many years, and they wouldn't do it. And Elon said, how big can we make a press? And they've got the world's biggest press now in Fremont for Model Y, making the entire rear section, and I think they're going to do the whole front section as well.
Yeah.
Now, certainly an open question is, when you do have a crash, can you straighten that frame, or do you have to replace that huge thing?
Robo taxis don't crash.
Yeah, okay. But,
and if you're going to bend the frame, the car's totaled anyway, so it's no different than a nice vehicle.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe, and I know they're very sturdy and all that. DeWarren, there's one thing to be a defensive driver, but if somebody wants to crash into you, that is somewhat difficult to, even if the
then they're paying for it. What difference does it make?
Okay, you got a point. To me, this chart reminded me a whole lot of the Cybertruck, because I wrote an article, of course, he talked about that in the Cybertruck, it was kind of based on airline technology. Exoskeleton and Monique. I don't think I'm pronouncing that right. I still don't know. Monocoque or something.
Yeah, I know a guy who worked at Boeing, and his job was actually auditing to make sure every rivet was in the wing fuel tank. So they had to crawl around inside that thing all the way to the edges, counting every single rivet to make sure the people who put them in put in enough exactly.
So, yeah, I love that you have just a few big batteries, but I love how the batteries make the whole thing stiffer. And I assume you guys remember the part about the convertible. If you've ever heard of convertibles, they always say, yeah, they're very flexing because they don't have the top to make them secure. And they're like, well, this, even if we did make a convertible, it's going to be very, very rigid. And that's good for crashes. That's good for handling. Wow.
Yeah, one of the biggest complaints Sandy Monroe had about the original Model 3 that he tore down and took apart was that there were redundant casings around the battery pack. So the battery pack itself was rigid, and then they put the battery pack into a casing, and that casing sat in the frame. And the frame and the casing and the battery pack were all sufficient to carry the load of the batteries that were in the pack. And it was just additional weight. Wasted. Yeah.
Okay, and then of course the module is another level of redundancy. So
they've taken this to the extreme. If you just make the battery pack the structural frame of the vehicle, you're done.
Yep. Is that 370 fewer parts? Yes, I know it isn't 3 parts, but when I saw this, it's like 3 basic parts. I know you got to put the top on, but you know what I mean. If you go from 373 parts to 3, and I assume you've got some connectors there. It's not just 3 parts, but still, it's
a huge savings. 70 pieces in that rear casting that had to be riveted together by people working on the line. You've got tremendous labor and time savings when you go to a casting.
Yeah. So this is the difference in factory. I'm surprised. I guess the reason it isn't smaller is those casting units those testing machines are huge. But who's to say this?
Well, this factory still has a paint shop. You go to Cybertruck, you don't have a paint shop anymore.
Yeah.
And you get really small.
Yep, and I don't know where the paint shop is in it, but you know. Okay, this puts it all together. I was a little surprised. Only 7% cost reduction for that last thing. But whatever, it all adds up.
Hey, which traditional automaker do you think is going to lower their cost per vehicle 7% next year?
No,
if you said zero, your number matches mine.
That's the stunning thing. We're so used to cars getting more expensive over time, and Tesla lowers the price of the car, and Wall Street says, "Oh my God, they're lowering the price of the car. That's terrible." It's like, well, consumers like it.
Well, I kind of agree with you, but I've also actually studied the CPI, the bowels of the CPI, and the CPI actually, and I've followed the traditional manufacturers. So let's say they take the price from 30,000 to 31,000, which they do, raise it 1,000. I recently wrote an article on that. What they announced to the government, and I think it's true, is they added 2,000 of optional equipment. Yep, now you get the surround sound speaker or whatever they added. So they actually consider that a 1,000 price decrease when they do that.
Yeah, Tesla improves your car and lowers the price.
Right. I mean, we improve the car from a 30,000 to maybe 33,000 and drop it to 27,000. So yeah, we do it more.
I mean, just look at the Model S. They lowered the price of the Model S to $75,000 from, I think it was 80. They didn't decontent the car when they did it. I think they increased the range.
Interesting fact: the original Model S was 57,400 with a 7. But they made very few of them. It was the original 40 with only 160 miles.
Right.
But they didn't go very far with that.
Yeah, that slide is the one that I tweeted about. I said this was the most important slide in the deck for a Tesla investor. This is Elon Musk's hardcore smackdown to anyone who still thinks EVs can't be profitable. So we can make the range 50% farther while making the cost per kilowatt hour 56% lower and reducing the cost of making the factories the machine that makes the machine by 69%. That is how you make the world transition to electric vehicles. This
is where Sandy Monroe says that the CEO of an ICE company's OEM wet his shorts.
Yeah.
They said that today, or obviously after the. You heard him on YouTube or Twitter, or where did you hear him?
It's not the Autoline interview on YouTube.
Okay.
I tweeted it. I tweeted the quote. I clipped that quote.
Yeah, I'll show you the stats on that tweet. It's got 3 million views.
Yeah.
Because Elon liked it.
Oh, because he liked it. Yeah.
Wow.
If Elon likes your tweet and replies to it, you get really strong engagement because he has 38.8 million followers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I've had many of my articles retweeted by Elon, maybe 15 or 20. But it's not connected to my personal Twitter. It's to Clean Technica's Twitter. So I don't get to see my Twitter blow up.
But this is the big slide. This is the step change.
Is that
James' slide is big. Yeah, this is the step change.
Yep.
Yeah.
So
lowering the cost curve.
It is, and like you say, it was going like this and then dramatically low. And we don't know. Maybe it'll continue to go down to 2030. Maybe it will level off there. But if it's done its job of killing off ICE vehicles, I guess it's done its job. I don't know if it needs to go lower.
And that won't be the total cost of the vehicle. That'll just be the battery pack portion of the vehicle. But still, that's the most expensive part of the vehicle. So that's the part you would want to go after first.
I mean, I don't think we want to spend too much time. We already kind of talked about the $25,000 vehicle. I was a little disappointed that it was delayed, but you guys countered that they've
Take time.
done a lot,
I think this is lowballing. I think that Elon previously said that the Model 3 would get down to $25,000 when you take off the steering wheel and the pedals. I think this compact that they're talking about is really going to be $20,000.
Well, I think he felt burned on the Model 3 that he promised 35 and then didn't want to do it. So this time, if internally they're saying, "Yep, let's design a $20,000 car," he says, "Let's announce 25,000 just to give ourselves a little cushion." Stand back.
Right. When you do whole frame casting on this car and you produce it in massive volume and you use lithium iron phosphate batteries, which they've said they're going to do, this thing, and it's going to have less material in it because it's going to be smaller. It damn well better be less than $25,000.
Yeah.
All right. It's a great note to leave on. Gentlemen, I've enjoyed the chat.
Hey, thanks. Good chatting with you.
Keep going without me. I will see you next time.
Great.
Okay, great. Yeah, I mentioned this. I already mentioned this before, that it's a little bit of a delay. I had one where
just to be clear, though, the Brownlee thing, he did not say we will deliver a $25,000 car in 3 years. Brownlee pushed him, when could you do it if you tried? And Elon said, well, if we tried, but he didn't try.
Okay, I get it, but
so Plaid Model S, you're right.
I get it. You're, but as soon as you say something, you know how it is. But no, it's important to quote people accurately. That's important. So here I just this was my interpretation of Rob Maurer of Tesla Daily's Battery Day preview, and I just kind of wanted to go over it for things that, did they hit what we expected, and are they going to start making their own battery cell? Yeah, they did that. Are they going to make battery chemistry changes? Well, we did talk. They didn't really get into the Jeffrey Don. They're going to add a lot, but they definitely talked about reducing the cobalt, increasing the silicon, and the LPF. So they did get into those, just not some of the more exotic little things that Jeffrey Don probably has done for them. But we're just getting too detailed. The dry battery electrode, I think they covered that really well. The million-mile battery we already talked about. They talked about it in code, but not by using the term.
Just above that, he's got cell to pack, and they actually skipped cell to pack and went straight to cell to chassis, which is something CATL has talked about doing too. Cell to chassis is. You
are right. They did go a level. We just thought it was going to be cell to pack, and then the pack was going to be put in chassis. They're going to make the pack, obviously got to make it a little bit stronger to make
CATL. There was an article a few months ago that CATL was working on that already. So that's not Tesla's own. That's why I think people say, "Oh, Tesla's miles ahead of everybody." The Chinese are very, very smart, and they're doing a lot. So don't underestimate the Chinese.
Good. The faster charging, they didn't. And somebody was talking about this today. I don't remember who I was listening to. I think this is another Osborning. They didn't want to say that next year we're going to have 30% faster charging, but certainly what they said about tablets, it's certainly going to be possible. Now, when it will be implemented and announced and all that,
So I'm going to be aggressive here. I think I understand from a consumer shopping perspective, faster charging matters, but I think as a practical matter, supercharging is rarely used for most drivers. It's not that important. It's important. It's not that important. It may be important to get people to buy. Some people.
It really depends how people use a car. I've only taken one long trip in my Model 3, and it was all the way to Western Florida. And it was with my whole family. And I think we had to charge twice, and it was 45 minutes. Would it have been nice if those 45-minute charges were 20-minute charges? Yes, they were, because we couldn't. You'd say, well, why don't you just eat then? Well, we were kind of going to a Thanksgiving. It wasn't actually Thanksgiving dinner, but it was a holiday dinner, so we didn't want to eat before we got there. So those we just needed to stop long enough to go to the bathroom, maybe get a small snack and stretch your legs. 20 minutes would have been enough. And then the other times I just drive across the state to visit my son. And yeah, I do need to do a quick 15-minute supercharge so that I have enough to get back. And that's it, existing technology. So if it, a couple times I have eaten, and it's a pain because it gets done so quick, I'm not done eating, and I'm worried about getting the charge. So
let me just make 2 points on this. Number one, if you increase range 50%, which is what they've said, basically saying they're going to do, then supercharging becomes less important because more of your trips are done within the range of the vehicle. And I believe lithium iron phosphate is capable of charging faster. I believe there's something about the lithium iron phosphate, the cycle life is higher. I think it doesn't heat as much. So it may be that the lithium iron phosphate batteries will be able to charge. They won't have more range, right? Their range will still be limited to maybe 300 miles.
Faster because you may eat on half your charges, but then you might have a charge where you don't want to eat.
Yeah. But if you got 500 miles range in your car instead of 300, then the supercharging matters a lot less.
The other thing is they always show peak rate of charging, and if your battery is small, it gets to that peak and then it falls off very quickly. With a larger battery, it will be able to maybe stay at the peak, for a longer period of time. Mining, they didn't talk about mining, but I was very happy they went back a step. So
did you want to skip Plaid? You skipped over Plaid.
Oh, okay, sorry. That was an accident. We talked about it a little bit with the picture. Yes, the Plaid is great. They're back on the top of the food chain. I would have preferred they just build the Roadster. They're building 90% of the Roadster for the Plaid S. They're, it's supposed to be a similar powertrain. I was a little disappointed it's delayed a year, but it's fine. They're doing a lot of other things.
Well, wait a minute. So think about this for a second. They announced that Plaid would do 0 to 60 in less than 2 seconds, right? What is Roadster supposed to do 0 to 60 in?
Less than 2 seconds. Yeah.
1.9 seconds. So this means Roadster will be 1.8 or better, the base model. So
the base model before you get to the SpaceX package. Yes.
Right. So I think that what this tells is, first of all, they didn't say that Plaid Model S will come before Roadster because they've already announced Roadster. I think they may both come out at the same time.
It could be. I have heard that it keeps being moved down the. I thought I'd heard a comment it moved to 2022. By the way, the acceleration of the Roadster, I've heard it defined as it depends what the tolerance of the driver and passenger is for G's. So you'll probably have to put, okay, I think with my age and blood pressure, I can take 3 G's, 2 G's, and you'll have to put that in, and it'll back off the acceleration based on what you can medically take.
Hey, my grandma's in the car today.
Yeah. The fastest one I've done is I believe I did the P90D test drive. And I believe that was about 2.6, 2.7 a couple years ago. Yeah, it caused a little bit of pain. It kind of gave me a headache. I kind of felt sick for about 3 hours. But I was glad I did it. Have you been in any of the super fast ones that cause pain? Or
fastest I've been is a Model 3 Performance.
That's which I've driven that also. I don't consider the Model 3 Performance painful. It's just fun. Model S just ramps it up. Each person's body can take a different amount of G's before it gets painful. These are starting to get into painful for certain people.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mining,
Have
they're
you heard
doing
the
it.
rumors of the Model X being discontinued, or do you have any comments on that? Some people have rumored that.
I thought that, but people told me that they actually sell more Model X's than Model S's. So I think, it's possible there's a team. I think the future for Model S and Model X, if there's a future for them, is if you apply the Model Y redesign to Model 3, Model S, and Model X, and you're able to get less than what I was saying before about going down to a $60,000 Model S. What if you redesigned the chassis? And what if you said, we're going to skip the gull wing doors on the new Model X because nobody cares, right? And that lowers the cost. And all of a sudden, you're delivering a Model S for $60,000 and a Model X for $65,000. I think Tesla's future's in the Model 3, the Model Y, and the Compact. That's where the volume is. That's where the robo-taxi revenue is.
The high volume van is an important one too.
Yes, but I don't think Model S and X are important to the long-term future of the company. I think they have a halo effect. I think if you can get wealthy white males to like your vehicles, to badly oversimplify and maybe be inappropriate, well, they're the investors. They're the ones who buy stock.
Okay, so the Navigator, the original Hummer, all of those, the big honking SUV. I realize the Cybertruck hits that, but I think maybe the big van, and maybe it'll be just a cyber SUV, but they need a bigger vehicle for people. Americans love big cars more than me.
I'm just saying the profit model. The profit and the acceleration of the transition to sustainable energy is in the 3, the Y, and the Compact. And maybe in a van that's used for mass transit, because, and I don't know if you've heard me talk about this before, but if you imagine a minibus that can carry 20, or let's say 20 people, but I think you go to 30 people, and if you do it right. And Elon talked about the density of how, if you design it right. But let's say you have 20 people and you've got, let's say the cost per mile is double the cost of the Model 3. Okay, so it's 30 cents a mile to run the thing, and you've got 20 people in it.
Wow.
Right? You're talking about $0.015 a mile per passenger mile. And I think you may be able to get the cost per mile down to less than that. And you may get the cost per mile down to 20 cents a mile, and you may get the passengers up to 30, and all of a sudden you're talking about less than a penny a mile cost of operation, not price that you're charging. But let's say you get it to where the cost for the passenger is a penny a mile, and I can go 500 miles for $5. I mean, that's just mind-boggling. And you do it in a.
Oh, it is.
And you do it in a boring company tunnel, and you go 150 miles an hour. And I forget, where in Florida do you live?
Tampa.
Okay, so I live in Boca. People here go to Orlando, right? They go to Disney, and it's a 3-hour drive, and you got to get a hotel, and you got to deal with parking and other hassles. Imagine if you're in Boca Raton, Florida, or let's say you were going to go to Miami, same idea. And instead of driving for 4.5 or 5 hours to go from Tampa to Miami, you pressed a button on your phone, you walked out your house, you hopped in a robo-taxi, it takes you, 5 miles, drops you off where you hop into a cyber van or a minibus or whatever that drops into a tunnel. It goes 150 miles an hour, and you're in Miami in an hour.
Wow.
Right. And then at the end of the day, instead of staying in a hotel in Miami, you just get back in the van and go home, and it costs you $5. Right? Each way, instead of spending $100 at a hotel, you spend $5 to go home. Right. And now one of the things, I'm sorry for going off on a tangent here. We don't have that big of an audience, but this is, I think, a really big deal, is imagine you live in a world where you can go to a place like Disney World and you no longer need to stay in a hotel. I think we have 8 people watching. But imagine that. Imagine you go to Disney World and you don't need to stay at a hotel. My cost of going to Disney and I'm not a Disney guy, but there's a lot of people in my community who are Disney people. The cost of going to Disney just dropped from $1,000 weekend to a $300 weekend for the family, or something like that. And all of a sudden, so you're eliminating jobs for the ice industry and the petroleum industry, but Disney could triple or quadruple in size. Right?
Yeah.
The destination resorts become hugely. The hotel industry gets killed, right?
Yeah.
Although the place becomes so attractive now that people will come from farther away and still stay in a hotel. But because now it's so big and they have so many attractions, and Disney can invest so much and have so many people coming in, and it's a monster potential for the economy, for that sector of the economy. People from Jacksonville could get to Disney in half an hour. I can get to Disney in half an hour, or an hour, whatever. It just radically changes. And I think it's one of the things it's so easy to talk about the jobs that will be destroyed. It's so fascinating to talk about the jobs that will be created, but it's so hard to see them. How do you see the jobs that are going to be created? It's very hard to see that.
I believe is that the classic Bastiat, The Seen and the Unseen, I believe, or Henry Hazlitt, Economics of One Lesson.
Too philosophical for me, but yes.
Yeah, because you can always see when the layoffs are announced, but all the little jobs created.
Well, the great example the best example of that is ATMs. Banks deployed ATMs, and people said, "Oh, all the teller jobs are going to be destroyed." ATMs were so good at making banking more efficient that the banks saved so much money on the transactions done with ATMs, they were able to open more branches, and they actually are more tellers today than there were before ATMs were created because they made banking more efficient. You can't, and look, I've done a lot of my work in life has been search engine optimization and social media marketing and things like that. These are things that didn't exist before Facebook and Twitter and Google. So we can't see the jobs that are going to be created, but we know they will be created.
Yeah, whenever someone is laid off, I guess I tend to use more the term they've been freed from doing an unproductive job to find new opportunities. I know that's an overly optimistic way, but that's just the way
it's reality.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if we can get through the rest of this, and then I actually do. I know we gained a person. We went from 6 to 7. Somebody came back. Mining. I wanted to say I was really happy. If you look at the supply chain, Tesla, makes the cars. You go back, they make the battery packs. As far as this, they're looking at making the cells. That's obvious, but they went further than just making the cells. It looks like they are making a lot of the ingredients that go into the cell, which means they may go farther back in the supply chain than even a Panasonic, an LG, or a Cattle. I don't know how far back they go. And then I don't think they need to go back into mining. But who knows where they'll be in 5 years if they see mining not doing any innovation.
Well, they're mining lithium.
What?
They're mining lithium.
See, I did not get the impression. They said they have rights to that. I think they just have a supply contract from a miner. I didn't think they were actually going to buy the mining equipment. I believe that was just a contractual arrangement, but I could be wrong.
Yeah.
Suppliers, yeah, they definitely covered that. They're not dropping Cattle, LG, or Panasonic.
They are increasing their purchases from their suppliers.
Well, I definitely think that in the 3-year, in the 10-year time frame, who knows? If they get this ramped up really well, and Panasonic, Cattle, and LG do not do similar efficiency gains, then there's no reason for them to buy their cells at twice the price.
No, because the demand is 10 terawatt hours just for vehicles and 10 terawatt hours for grid storage. And Tesla only anticipates making 3 terawatt hours. So there's 17 terawatt hours of demand left. And I think Tesla is going to make more than 3 terawatt hours. I think they're going to be closer to 10 terawatt hours, but there's still 10 terawatt hours left or 15 terawatt hours left. They will buy more. There is unlimited demand, effectively unlimited demand. So listen, I know you probably have a little bit more you want to do, but I'm exhausted.
No, I actually, the only thing I wanted to do, I think I am done. I'm not going to go over my cost things. I just wanted to give a shout out. Are there any comments that we want to shout out to, or
Just thank everyone for watching. I think I think we pretty much addressed the people were talking about the stuff we talked about, and I think we're good.
Okay. I didn't know if we should watch this a little more. Yep, a couple people. Thank people for watching. I was going to ask you, I probably will break this up into other little sections because somebody's going to want to maybe watch a 10-minute section of us discussing one little piece of it rather than, the 200.
Do what you got to do.
But we'll see how that goes. Okay, thanks everybody. And don't know when I'll be on again. Maybe this weekend. So.
All right. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you, Warren, for coming.